everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. Today, I am sincerely thrilled to be joined by the comedian, actor, writer, podcaster, and noted baseball fan, River Butcher. And before we go, I'll tell you real quick about my desperate desire to step in as the school guidance counselor at Euphoria High, the most dangerous place for teenagers in the entire United States of America. You may have seen today's co-host back in the CISO days, R.I.P. CISO, on their show Take My Wife, or heard his new comedy album, Pull Yourself Up by Your Bootleg. He hosts the Three Swings Baseball podcast. You can watch his new stand-up special, A Different Kind of Dude, starting, drumroll please, today. And you can locate that on Comedy Central's YouTube channel, so check it out. River, is there anything else we need to know about you, and should I have put baseball fan higher on that list?
What's up, Jordan? Great to see you.
Hello.
I think that was right where it needs to be. It's become a large portion of my identity. Right. It's a big part of my life.
Well, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, I'm excited to have you specifically because you're wonderful at what you do. I enjoy your work. You're a very enjoyable, saving grace kind of presence on the internet, which you can't say about everybody. Good, decent.
I mean, I've made my mistakes, but I appreciate that.
Yes, of course. But it's a place where it's where I'm not going to find toxic fandom bullshit is from River Butcher. So thank God for that.
I mean, I've been on Twitter since 2007. I mean, I've been on it since it started. I was just on it because I was I've just always been into the internet.
You're an early adopter.
An early adopter of the internet, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I've been on it for way too long, and so it's definitely been. I actually really truly appreciate you saying that. That's a very nice thing to say.
We're talking about a seminal film today. We're talking about a landmark of cinema. We are talking about Back to the Future.
Marty.
Yeah, specifically Marty George McFly. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Back to the Future is about for those coming late to the game?
Sure. So Back to the Future is a movie about Marty McFly, a 17-year-old California teen who is inexplicably friends with a old elderly scientist / inventor.
So eccentric.
Who, who, to make a long story short, has invented a time machine, which is made out of a DeLorean, which, for those of you born after 1995, was a fancy car that was made for 3 years.
Yeah.
By a dude who was high on coke.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
And he mistakenly time travels back to 1955, which also happens to be the year both of his parents were 17, so he's hanging out with his parents in high school.
Look at this picture. It's my brother, my sister, and me. Look at her sweatshirt, Doc. Class of 1984.
Pretty mediocre photographic fakery. They cut off your mother's hair.
And because of his falling in the lap of his mom, he diverts her romantic attention from his father and then has to essentially get them back together so that he is born.
Yeah, so he doesn't get erased
he
from
will
time.
Never exist. Erased from existence.
Let me see that photograph again of your brother. Just as I thought. This proves my theory. Look at your brother.
His head's gone. It's like it's been erased.
Erased from existence.
In researching for you coming on, I've heard you talk a lot about Back to the Future. This is something I will talk about Jennifer's body if you give me any forum. If that forum is a microphone on the side of the street, I'm going to do it. So I wanted to know what makes Back to the Future the evergreen topic you continue enjoy going back to. What is the richness of that for you?
I mean, why would I want to talk about Back to the Future for an hour? Not because I've talked about it a lot, but because it's a movie that I have spent my entire life with.
Yeah.
And is it something that I watch very often these days? Not really. How often do I think about that movie? At least once a week, which is kind of ridiculous.
Well, and I was noticing it in reading print interviews with you, having nothing to do with Back to the Future. There was a point where you were like, well, as Doc Brown would say, and you quoted Doc Brown. Yeah. I was like, just noticing how it was like just weaving its way through places where even where it wasn't was really interesting to see, knowing that I was going to be discussing it with you.
Of course. I saw this. I feel like it was one of the first non-children's movies I experienced. Like, you know, first movies I couldn't tell you what the very first movie I saw, but like I distinctly remember my mom renting this movie, watching it the night before, a Friday night, and then watching it with me on Saturday morning. And I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Was that like her review screening? Like, okay, we're going to watch this, but like, here's my screening watch.
Yeah,
okay,
here's the thing. And she did like tee it up. She was like, so there's going to be some language in this movie that is like not okay, you know? And so I was like, okay. And that's all I really remember her like, which is interesting because we'll talk about, you know, there's some other stuff in that movie.
Has a patina of time on it in some ways.
Sure. Yeah. I remember, you know, the sort of like early action sequence with the, you know, the quote terrorists again in air quotes and stuff. That sort of race scene, he's like saying, holy shit.
Holy shit!
That was like a joke in my family of like this little 4-year-old going, hey mom, is holy shit a bad word? You know, like I didn't know because I'd never seen it before. So like it's just sort of embedded in my psyche, this movie, you know, and its sensibility in certain ways. And I guess I just always felt, and in this way seen, a kinship with Marty. I think number one, because I was an only child, which he's not, but it very much feels like, you know, he's on his own journey, like alone with his parents. And I was an only child of divorced parents. So I very much like the beginning of that movie that shows this sort of like, I guess, like baseline dysfunction.
Yeah, that,
you know,
dinner,
sort of
that
like,
dinner table scene is almost like there's such a, as an adult watching it, you can feel the melancholy in it that like, of course, as a kid, I wasn't picking up on, but I watch it now, I'm like,
no,
man, that's tough for Marty. Like,
we all make mistakes in life, children.
Yeah, and but it's also just the life that he has, you know, and like he's not, of course, there's the conversation to be had that movie is a bit, you know, it's like a capitalist dream where like, oh, the goal is to have the car and the but the thing is like they have the same house, you know, so that is my one little, it's like, yes, they have a nicer car, they have nicer things, it looks better, blah, 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 all this stuff. But they actually love each other is the thing.
Yeah.
You know, that is ultimately, it is dressed up with some stuff that I don't necessarily agree with. But, you know, now I'm an adult and like, I'm happy that each of my parents they did what they needed to do. But as a kid, there was a fantasy for me in, oh, if I could just get a time machine, maybe I could go back in time and I could like help my parents out. Yeah. You know, which is just like such a funny thing to experience as a 4-year-old.
As a 4-year-old, yeah.
And not really realize it. Not really realize that that's what was going on.
Yeah, to grow up and understand that you didn't have language for it and you weren't expressing it, but you're like, oh my God, I know that feeling. Like, I can absolutely describe that feeling to you now, and this is what was happening inside me. Like,
totally. That, like, if I could just get that car, then I could go back, and there's something I could do. It's within my means to do this. And I've gone through a lot of work to unwind all of that.
To not feel like that was my 4-year-old responsibility.
Yeah, it has I have no responsibility over that whatsoever.
Well, what was, you know, when you're, you know, you're little and you're seeing Marty there, I thought it was an interesting thing I've heard you talk about is sort of the genderlessness of Marty McFly for you. And like I heard you say, like, obviously he's a guy. Like, that's he's got the girlfriend that he loves. The thing I think of first when I think of this movie is honestly the unbelievably palpable horniness of Lorraine Baines from Leah Thompson. It's still, even now when I watch
Leah Thompson
it, makes me bashful.
Incredible in
like,
that movie.
I blush watching her performance. I'm like, Lorraine?
Yeah, which is so, I mean, here's something that I love about that movie because, well, I'll just go for the second part first, which is, and a reason why I wanted to continue talking about it is because, like, I watched it recently and I could see all of it. Not that I didn't see them already, but I saw its flaws in a new way. Yeah. I saw, like, I think it's Bob Gale. It's one of the dudes that made it, right? I don't like the way he talks about his own film. And that's the thing about art is you can actually separate the art from the artist because there's more than one person making a movie. There's Leah Thompson performing it. There's the gaffers. There's like all these things. And like there was some Hulu documentary about the movie, right? And so I started watching that and he's like, yeah, so like what if your mom's a slut? And I'm just like, whoa.
Wow,
like the
Bob.
way he's talking about it was just like so retrograde, you know? And I'm like, it makes complete sense to me. But I watch it now and I'm like, Leah Thompson's performance is so earnest.
Yes.
You know, it's so earnest. And like, also be a slut. I don't care. You know what I mean? But like, that's him in a judgmental way. It's not like, oh yeah, she's a slut, which is great, whatever. It's like very judgmental and from an old time. But to me, I'm like, she performs it with such earnestness that it's just like, oh yeah, she's a real person.
Yeah.
She really did not become the cartoon that he's talking about. You know, she is like the way she's like sneaking around is, I don't know. It's just so good. You know, it's just like, it's actually really grounded in like, oh yeah, this is how people
Lorraine
are.
Baines is so lived in.
Yeah, she's really good in it.
That's a great idea. I'd love to park. Huh. Marty, I'm almost 18 years old. It's not like I've never parked before.
What?
At a certain point, Bob Gale had very little to do with it. And that was
Absolutely.
Leah making her choices.
Yeah, 100%. And so like, yeah, like he didn't direct it. He was, you know what I mean? It's like, so I know it's hard to, and that phrase separating the art from the artist is like kind of loaded these days. And the thing is like, you have to do it every time. And sometimes you can't because there are certain arts that I can't, you know?
Yeah.
So each instance of that practice is different. So I just want to say that to anybody that's listening, that it's like, it's not a rubber stamp, you know, like you can't just say like, well, separate the art from the artist there. Everything is fine. It's like each time it's very different. And then to get back to the sort of like genderlessness, it's interesting to me because my own experience of that has changed.
Yeah.
Because now I would say, I think that still holds true. However, what I realize now looking back, the genderlessness to me of Marty McFly was because I was experiencing it from a position and an age and a time and a spirit of genderlessness. Because, and I'm not an expert. I'm just speaking of my own experience of gender, transness, all this stuff.
You are an expert in your own personal experience.
That's right. Is that when we're talking about children, you know, and like a 4-year-old, myself as a 4-year-old, I wasn't thinking about the world as boys and girls and boys and girls. It's like I was told that. And we're all told that. And it's an experience, it's a learned experience. And I think we would do better to realize that kids are bringing us something that we've stopped thinking about because we've been told these things and we're so much further away from it. And it's not that all kids are genderless, but they're a little less gendered. You know what I mean? And we put that on them and we shuffle them into certain places and we add that to them as opposed to each person sort of gradually getting to where they want to be. So that's a long-winded way of saying to me, like when I saw that movie, I saw myself as that character. You know, some people would watch that movie and see themselves as Lorraine or Jennifer or, you know, whatever. And I mean, I just also saw myself as George. You know, I just never, that's what's so wild when I, you know, like finally began to accept myself, just period, was I even think about music, I think about songs and things, and I'm like, oh man, you never, like when you hear a woman singing about a man, you are not her. Yeah. The song is being sung to you. And that's just always been my perspective. That's just been my experience. Or if a man is singing about a woman, you're singing the song.
I mean, that's why Swifties can so easily, queer Swifties can so easily graft queerness onto Taylor Swift because they've headcanoned every longing song from Taylor Swift to being about Carly Kloss and their Kaylor Truthers. And it's just,
wow. I'm learning so much in like 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just let me know if you ever want a primer on Kaylors. Every once in a while, I realize that this isn't the most common of knowledge, and I'm like, oh, well, let me get into this. So, yeah. But then has there been a sort of seesaw experience over the course of your life with where you see yourself with George and where you see yourself with Marty? Does it oscillate depending on, or are they just kind of both part of you all the time?
I mean, yeah, I think they're my two genders, if you will. or you know, my sun and my ascendant, I guess.
Yes.
If not to be binary about everything, they're my poles or whatever. I mean, I definitely and I realize this about myself too. And I'm on screen with like glasses on and stuff. Like I just was always like, I am the nerd guy like that. Like when I was a kid, that was everything had a nerdy guy.
Yeah.
Everybody had an Egon. Every
Absolutely.
grouping had an Egon, and that was just like the framing for every kid's thing, and that was just always who I thought I was and wanted to be. And so in that way, I like really related to George. And I also think George's attraction to Lorraine is like his particular like, I don't know what to do and I don't know how this works and she's not even looking at me was like a form of like queerness that I inherently understood because as a kid, and obviously I'm like a 4-year-old child, and the scene where Marty sees his dad peeping on Lorraine, which obviously I don't.
Tom.
He's a peeping Tom.
Which is not consensual and I'm not like cool with or whatever, but I would have to I used to figure out ways to leave the room for that scene because there was something in me that was like, oh, I'm not supposed to look at that.
Right, yeah.
I'm not supposed to be seeing that. And people thought I was a girl, so it's like, now, could that be like lesbianism? Maybe. I'm sure there's people who are lesbians who've had the same experience. I now understand that it's like just something even more than that. Like it includes that. And it also is even more than that I'm like, oh, I'm like a boy. And so boys aren't supposed to look at girls that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he is a peeping Tom. We're not supposed to do that. It's just like, it's funny.
Yeah, you're like, I'm
funny.
grafting on to the, better social construct that Marty is expressing of like, boys don't spy on girls like that. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I
You're
would
not supposed
never
to do that. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and the thing, this touches on something that, like, the art v. the artist, and then, like, that gets to something I wanted to ask you about, and I was really grateful when I read you sort of address it in an interview about something entirely different, which is the idea, the fact that queer people, before they're even conscious of it necessarily, like, a thing that I really like about this podcast, and when I get to talk to queer folks who come on and speak with me is, I really do believe that queer kids are kind of like they're forced to be sort of creative geniuses from the very start of their life because they're so often having to put themselves places, and this is something I think you said exactly, see themselves in places where they're not. And talking to people who get into filmmaking in the arts and creative fields, like that's a practice you started from the very beginning of your life before you even knew it, that you were like changing the story in your head consciously or subconsciously for how you need to know. I think that's an incredible thing that queer folks are just kind of conditioned to do, whereas most people or gender normative, perhaps like not queer individuals might not necessarily get that training as early on. And we kind of like have to be storytellers from the start if we want it to work out for us at all.
I mean, 100%. Well, here's the thing. That is like the ultimate human space. Is storytelling, right? So not to say that queer people are better storytellers or anything like that. There is the argument to be said that the silver lining of being left out is having to do more to create, And we are not even close, but I don't even know when that interview is from.
Right. I think it's like like 2018 or 2017.
Sure. Even in that amount of time, the amount of entertainment that is available with queerness in it is huge compared to even just then. And what I think that creates is it's not going to remove the thing you're talking about. What it actually does is allows for not queer people to do that same thing. To go like, oh, wait, how do I, because that's the thing is that it's not a binary. It's not, if you want to decenter, cisgender, hetero, white patriarchy, which is not any one person. It is an institution that transcends everything we have. If we want to actually decenter that, then you have to imagine that. You have to imagine what that looks like. And so to do that as like a white, straight, cisgender woman or man, because we're talking about the binary in that situation, once you begin to see yourselves in characters that are not like you at all, and then you see that character in you, you see yourself in them, and you feel them in you, that's when that storytelling starts to begin for the people who have not had to do it.
It's a really nice thought.
Because it's not a one-way street, and it's not even a two-way street. Yeah, that's the thing about, like, to me being people I think still see me as like a non-binary person, which is a different kind of woman, and it's like, that's not it.
Right, yeah.
For me, I'm a trans guy who believes in a non-binary existence, which is that there's more than two ways of being, you know? And that's just where I'm at now, as opposed to, you know, a couple years ago. Because a couple years ago, that would be that could be accurate.
Right,
know?
yeah.
So I get where you're coming from, but that's not where I'm coming from anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
you're like, I passed through that stoplight. Like, I was at that intersection, and you're just like a couple stops behind me.
Yeah, absolutely. Or we're just like in the same neighborhood, but we're not on the same street, you know, whatever. And it's like growing and it's expanding and everything, you know.
Now,
so yeah,
I'm curious if it, like, seeing this, so, because I remember my first movie where I realized that it wasn't the girl or the boy on screen that was for me, it was like probably both, was Labyrinth. And I was like, Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie are both creating a reaction in me. And
absolutely.
So now with being so young when you saw this, and if, you know, was Lorraine Baines that kind of, was that like a oh
for sure. Definitely. And I mean, I also like Jennifer, I feel like, is a bit of an object in that movie as opposed to like a fully formed character, you know. And I think props to Elizabeth Shue for doing a lot with a little in the second
that
episode.
was like Megan Fox in a Transformers movie. I'm gonna go on my own journey regardless of what's on this page.
It's really so good. Like what was written for her is so bad. And what she did with it is
periodically
pretty
be
incredible.
Unconscious, Jennifer.
Right, exactly. I mean, wow. You guys really did something with this that could have been really bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's some bad stuff, but like it could have been really awful, you know, and it wasn't because you're having fun.
Yeah, because you were given something gossamer thin and you decided to make a whole wardrobe out of it.
And you made it, you know, like, which is just really cool. Like, I feel, and Leah Thompson does such a good job of playing like old Lorraine.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's incredible. But to circle back to that, like, I definitely think both Jennifer and Lorraine, I was just like, yes. You know what I mean? But like, you spend more time with Lorraine. So like, I had a huge crush on her. And I actually like ran into Leah Thompson on a plane. And like, because I saw her in the airport. It was in San Francisco, which is like kind of, it's not a small airport, but all the pieces of it are small. And I remember seeing her and being like, that's Leah Thompson. Like immediately knew it was her. And then immediately was like, maybe not. And then I got on the plane. She sat down in her seat and then got up on, like turned around. And I was like, holy shit. It is Leah Thompson. And I was like, I'm not going to say anything because good God, you know, like she's with her kids and all that stuff. And like, you know, whatever. And then I like went to the bathroom and then I was coming back and I was in the aisle and she was going to the bathroom. So there was like no avoiding it.
I have had those moments where it's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to bother him. I'm not. But then suddenly it's like, how have you been put in front of me 6 times now?
Presented with the opportunity over and over again.
It just keeps happening.
Yeah. And she was first of all, she is a very tiny lady. She's not very tall, which it makes a lot of sense because so's Michael J. Fox, you know, like
and he looked bigger than her,
a big guy. And so we were like face to face, and I was just like, I am a huge fan of your work. You know, like I just, you know, whatever. And she was like, oh, that's so nice. What's your name? And I was going by my old name then, and I told her, and she was like, oh wow, my name's Leah. That's really close.
That's nice.
And in that moment, I was like a 4-year-old because I remember watching the credits and seeing that name and being like, wow, that's almost my name.
Way!
And like had that moment happen with that actual person.
That's so cute.
It was pretty funny and wild. And yeah, it's just, she was very cool. It was very nice.
Well, on that precious note, we're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back with even more River Butcher. So stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Ellen Weatherford.
And I'm Christian Weatherford.
And we've got big feelings about animals that we just gotta share.
On Just the Zoo of Us, your new favorite animal review podcast, we're here to critically evaluate how each animal excels and how it doesn't, rating them out of 10 on their effectiveness, ingenuity, and aesthetics.
Guest experts give you their takes informed by actual, real-life experiences studying and working with very cool animals like sharks, cheetahs, and sea turtles.
It's a field trip to the zoo for your ears.
So if you or your kids have ever wondered if a pigeon can count, why sloths move so slow, or how a spider sees the world, find out with us every Wednesday on Just the Zoo of Us in its natural habitat on MaximumFun.org.
Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is a podcast.
Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
That thing is not my daughter. And I want you to tell me there's a show where the hosts don't just report on fringe science and spirituality, but take part themselves.
Well, there is, and it's Oh No, Ross and Carrie on Maximum Fun.
This year, we actually became certified exorcists.
So yes, Carrie and I can help your daughter.
Or we can just talk about it on the show.
Oh No, Ross and Carrie on MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola, and I'm here with the hilarious and insightful River Butcher, and we are talking about the 1985, of course, classic film, Back to the Future, in a way that there's a good chance it's never been talked about before. And I say that knowing that River has talked about this movie many times, so I am very excited to get back into it. It's something I've noticed with beloved films from this era, sort of Gen X or formative years era. Movies like, obviously, Back to the Future here, or something like Ghostbusters, or really any movie that people have this intense nostalgia around.
Sure.
Is that there's often this reluctance to look at it in any new way or push back against any part of it at all. And it becomes this sort of, throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you analyze one part of it too critically, you're condemning the entire thing and, fuck you forever. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this very complex and contentious at times relationships between art and fandom and certain childhood stuff that just has this strangely untouchable, almost sacred status with certain factions of very online fans. So
Sure,
I'd like to hear from you a little bit about that.
Sure. And I mean, I think it makes sense to talk about a movie that's about time travel, to talk about it as though it has no, permanence.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Period. That's the point of the idea of time travel. Although time travel rests upon the idea that time is somehow in existence throughout all time. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I used to get really into time travel. Now I'm just like, I need that brain space for other shit. But what's interesting to me, because you also brought up nostalgia, so I want to talk about that in regards to this movie. But I would say, and this is just my perspective on it, is that yes, art belongs to everybody, but I think the issue is that no one owns it.
Right.
It depends that you can belong to everything. You know what I mean? Like, we all belong to everything. And it's just that this idea that, this pervasive idea that, is part of the structure of capitalism, of all these things, patriarchy, all these things, is that there can be only one way, and that you can own it.
Yeah.
And you can't own anything. I don't own these, I'm borrowing all of this stuff. And so once you let go of the illusion of ownership, everything just becomes a lot more fun. Yeah. Because you don't have to maintain any sort of idea or structure to your appreciation of something. you know, like, and then you can sort of get down with like, oh, this is what you like about it. Oh, cool. This is what I like about it, as opposed to like, this is what I like about it. And if you don't, you can go to hell. Like, you know, it's like, that's my way or the highway, which is very just like capitalist hierarchical thinking, you know, that like, well, if you present me with a different idea and I agree to that, then I'm less than you, which is also like misogynist. You know what I mean? Like, that's ultimately what those things are, you know, like they work with the same mechanisms and feelings, and it's all rooted in fear, you know? And I would say that like Back to the Future is all rooted in fear too, until it isn't.
Right. Yeah.
You know, especially the second two, I keep calling them episodes, which is just so funny. The second two movies that somehow see, because that's the other thing about Back to the Future, is that in the first one, like Marty is very much, you know, he's a guy. Let's put it that way. Let's use like it's a gendered word, but it's less like binaried, right? He's a guy, but he's also not like when he, you know, when they're in the diner and stuff, he like stands up for his parents because he's a good person. You know, he's not doing it to prove his masculinity. Whereas then in the second and third one, all of a sudden he doesn't want to be called a chicken.
What did you call me, Griff?
Chicken! McFly!
Nobody calls me chicken.
You know, like, it's very weird, and it's a very weird turn to me, and it kind of takes away some of the stuff that we're talking about of Marty, that like he's reluctant to do that stuff because he wants his dad to do it, so that his dad, you know, and there is a lot of like very sexist stuff in terms of like George needs to whatever, but like that's also what Lorraine is looking for, you know, and like that's also okay, you know, like, did he write that because she's a woman? Absolutely. Does she play it like it's something she actually as a person wants? Yeah. And like, that's a relatable thing for somebody to want someone to stand up for you. Like, that's a human thing, you know, it doesn't have to be a woman thing, even though it is in the context of the movie.
So what is, you know, when you talk about like the thing, it's like, you know, the thing that I love about it, the thing that you love about it. What is like a quintessential Marty McFly moment where that intersects with River Butcher?
I mean, I think that the moment that I was like, yes, is the when he steals the skateboard, when he like turns the thing into the skateboard and then is like skating around.
Wow, look at him go! What's that thing he's on?
It's a board with wheels.
He's an absolute dream.
And I was just like, yes, this is everything I ever want to do. You know, like he's already playing the guitar. He was already skateboarding, but now he's like legit skateboarding. And he's in the 50s. Because like I also weirdly, and I feel in some ways this relates to my transness, is like I just never felt like I was in the right time. Like I loved It's a Wonderful Life when I was a kid. I watched it in the summertime. Like I just always felt like I was of the wrong time, you know?
Seeing your style just in glimpses as like a public figure, I feel like that aesthetic actually does it would make a lot of sense.
It comes
on you.
through. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I was like raised by my grandparents also, and they're from like, you know, the 20s and the 30s. Basically, you know, my grandfather was born in 1912. So like I just had that around me anyway. And then I just didn't feel, I never felt like of the time that I was in when I was a kid. And so I feel like that moment, you know, was just like very much just this like adventure, you know, like, and also being like chased and I don't know, it's just, it's such a huge cinematic moment too, you know?
Oh yeah.
But it just was so cool and fun and inventive, you know, that I feel like that was it. But I also feel so much like when Lorraine tracks him down and is like flirting with him, and like I relate to that so much because it's like, yes, it's clearly weird because it's his mom.
Yeah.
But like, let's set that aside for a moment and go like,
let's table that.
I felt his discomfort with that because at that moment for me, as a kid, if that would have happened, I wouldn't have known what to do because I would have felt like something wrong was happening, which is how he felt, you know, like, but I wanted that, you know, like I wanted, and, you know, I have an expansive experience of my queerness, but like my experience of life was very binary as a kid because that's what you're presented with.
Marty, why are you so nervous?
Lorraine, have you ever been in a situation where you knew you had to act a certain way, but when you got there, you didn't know if you could go through with it?
Oh, you mean like how you're supposed to act on a first date?
Oh, sort of.
So, like, if that happened, if a girl like that did that to me, I would feel the same way that Marty did. You know, like, in that, like, this shouldn't be something, this is wrong and this shouldn't be happening, and you don't know why, but I do.
Yeah.
You know, and like,
I do.
You know, and I know that this is wrong. And it's like, oh, that was my own. It was like I was watching my own internalized homophobia and transphobia play out through this weird, like, mother-son time travel thing. But it's like, oh, that's what that was. That's what I was feeling, is that, like, something in me is wrong in the external world, and it was playing out on screen for me, and I was going like, I don't know what this is, you know. Which is just wild. It's wild to think about.
That fits under a category of things that I try to bring up whenever I can on in conversations with the podcast, is like those moments where it's like the oh no, where like it's the moment of recognition but not the welcome kind. We were like, skewered on that one.
Everything's different now.
I can't unknow what I've just been shown.
Yeah. Fast forward to 33 years later. You know?
You're probably wondering how I ended up in a situation like this.
That's right. Talk about time travel. Anyway.
Well, what is, you know, with something being so, you know, this is like a long-term relationship in your life, this movie. And
yeah, dude.
And obviously throughout, like, you know, as one grows and change, different things about the art we appreciate stick to us, or things arise out of it. Like, oh my God, I wasn't even looking at that 15 years ago. What do you find has been like the lasting impact of having Marty and George McFly with you for so long?
I mean, it does just feel like these long-term friendships that they've just like been around. And then when I see, like, even just those actors, it's like I feel like I know them, you know, like I don't at all. It's also funny because those characters have been such a big part of my life, and similar to baseball, like we were talking about earlier, the love of that movie and those characters and the relationship with those characters has afforded me other relationships. You know, it's like it's this connection to other people who also like have their own experience of those characters and have, you know, in different ways and different experiences felt similar to me in that I relate to this person. I feel like I was a huge Back to the Future fan and Indiana Jones, and everybody else is into Star Wars. Star Wars and Ghostbusters. Yeah. So it's like anybody that you can find that's like, I don't want to say genuinely, because that also creates like a gatekeeping thing, but is like romantically into Back to the Future the same way other people are with Star Wars, which I respect. It just doesn't do it for me the same way. Then you have that kinship with those people, those actual real people that you get to experience, you know? And I think in some ways I've gotten to be my own Marty McFly and my own George McFly, in that pretending as though 2 and 3 are not existing, you know, to like sort of make the changes in yourself to be the person that you want to be, you know, to have the relationships in your life that you want to be in, and be the person in those relationships that you want to be, you know, because I would also say like Marty was like desiring these things, you know, like he really wanted this truck and he really wanted all this stuff, and like he was still a good kid ultimately, you know, and like he ended up getting those things, and he just wanted to get back home. Yeah. You know, like he just wanted to get back to where his life was, you know, and ultimately that's what I've done, is that I just wanted to get back to my life, you know, and the things that come to you after that are just like blessings, honestly, on top of that. So you know, the Toyota 4x4 is like a very materialistic idea of, but he also just like has this life and is surrounded by people who love themselves. And that's what was missing before, right? You know? Yeah, that's what was missing at the beginning, is like they did not love themselves enough to love each other, you know? And that's the ending of that movie to me. And then it becomes very codependent, where Doc's like, well, now we got to help these other people. It's like, I don't know, maybe things are supposed to happen for a reason, and we just like let it go.
Doc's got an agenda, and Marty's just happy living his truth.
Yeah.
There was, the last thing I wanted to bring up as we come to time is that just in another And I think that's, to me, this connects to like the way, you know, you can queer anything, even no matter like how heteronormative its origins, can belong to any person. Like a friend of mine loved the I Know What You Did Last Summer TV show, and we are convinced that every fiber of that show is gay into its very DNA.
Yeah.
And we don't know the specifics of the people who wrote it, but we're like, oh, this is queer horror. Like, obviously every moment of this is queer. And just the freedom and the joy of being able to decide that in a thing that you said in an interview that I read, where I identify as panromantic, gray, asexual. And so relationships and intimacy and companionship look different for me than I found most people that I know in my life. And you said something in an interview where you said that queerness is not just a thing that is determined by a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And I really valued that. Because we do view things so binarily as sexual and non-sexual. Like, the ultimate way of knowing a person is through a sexual relationship. The ultimate classification of relationship, a codification of somebody as like your primary companion, is through sexual connection with them. And that's not how I experience the world. And so to just hear a person say something like that, queerness is not defined by a relationship, really made me happy, because it was just like, no, the queerness is there. The queerness exists regardless of the relationship you keep with it. It is who you are, and it is what you bring to a space, and it's how you read and filter things. And I love that, from the idea of like personal relationships that we have to interpersonal relationships to the relationships we have with movies. And I really appreciated you saying that.
Yeah, dude. Happy to say it. It really, whoever said it to me, it really helped me out, you know?
Yeah.
Like you know, obviously we have an assumption of heterosexuality in our cis-normative all the thing, right?
All
the assumption.
Multi-hyphenates.
So if you can base that assumption on someone not being in a heterosexual relationship, then you can absolutely be queer without being in a relationship, being sexual, being whatever. You are queer if you are queer. That's it. And it's not anybody else's decision than yours, you know, or decision to state that, you know what I mean? Like, it's coming from inside the house. It's not an external validation, you know?
And Back to the Future can be queer if you are queer.
Yeah, dude. Whatever is whatever. Whatever you need it and want it to be. I mean, I think about Facts of Life all the time. Like Joe and Blair,
heard you talking about that on a podcast, and I loved. In my head, I started, because everything started being patterns. I was like, I love the visibility both for River of like connecting with Joe, showing up as like the cute stranger on the motorcycle that all the girls wanted, and then Michael J. Fox.
She was a boy when she showed up. They're like,
exactly,
this hot guy
and
or
then
whatever.
Michael J. Fox shows up as Marty McFly as the cute stranger that all the girls are wondering about. I liked that as a through line in those two things.
I love to be context free. Nobody knows where I came from. But yeah, those two actors, you know, like they've said many times, and I think it was maybe difficult for the actor that played Joe too. I think it was probably difficult. But like, you know, they're like, no, they weren't gay. Da, 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 da. I'm like, yeah, no, I hear you, but I'm also watching you guys, and what we're saying is, it's there. Like, whether you are aware of it or not, it's totally there. And like, it's just a queer relationship. You know, like, you guys don't have to be queer, but the relationship, the relating that you're doing to each other is very queer. And like, that's cool. You don't have to, nothing's wrong. Everything's good. We don't need to change anything. And like, also, you don't even have to accept it, but it's totally there, because it's totally there, and it's awesome. Like, I guess for me, I'm just like, people are getting there, where I think that I've heard so many actors that were not working in 1982 say like, yeah, these characters are not gay, but like the fact that people are seeing queerness in this relationship is really awesome to me as an actor, because it means I'm doing my job or whatever. And so like, we're living in a time where more often than not, people are very open to the interpretations of their audiences. And like, I think as an actor myself, I'm like, I want you to look in, I want you to find more in this than I'm bringing to it. 'Cause like, that makes my job more fun.
Yeah.
You know, that makes the thing more interesting if you can find more in it than was intended. Like, isn't that what art is supposed to be? Like, it's not a blueprint, you know, like it's not a math equation that we just like walk from point A to point B and then we leave and we go, okay, that was exactly what I thought it was going to be. You know, like, what the hell?
Well, I believe I've kept you past time, so
I've had a great time.
I will wind us down, but I thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thanks for having me.
And in this conversation, I so appreciate people coming on to talk about this because I find it so fun and I find it important, and I really appreciate you being game to get into it with me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm happy to talk about something that I've talked about a bunch of times and find new things in it. You know, that's ultimately like what I love about that movie is, even though, you know, there's things that I don't like in it, and like allowing myself to not like things and still like it is like important, I think, for me. And for art and these things that we like to grow with us is like just a fun thing, and to get to share it is really cool, you know, because everybody, then you get to experience it. It grows, you know, it grows and changes and things.
And so is there anything you would like to remind us about before we depart today, River?
I mean, probably just the Comedy Central special. Like, check that out. Filmed that like right before Delta hit. Really, it was a pretty wild thing to do. Honestly, can't believe it made it, and I hope people watch it and like it. I'm really stoked that I got to do it, and it's a lot of fun. And I already look super different. Which is like pretty funny. I filmed it when I was going by RB, and then I changed my name like after that. And so it's like a real fun, like, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm really trying to welcome the public transition of it all.
Right.
I'm just like, oh, this is going to, so this is going to help somebody. Like, my facial hair's wacky. My voice has been different, but whatever. Like, it's just the experience, you know? So
yeah, everybody watch the fabulous timeline of River Butcher, most recent installment in A Different Kind of Dude. And River, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. So much fun to talk Back to the Future with you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. That conversation about Back to the Future and that conversation about conversations as much as I did. We covered a lot of ground today, but don't worry, there is still time for one quick thing before I go because I talk quickly. Guys, who out there is watching Euphoria? Who out there is putting themselves through anguish with these teens week after week, watching Euphoria? I delayed starting it for a couple weeks because I was like, can I put myself through this? Can I bear to see Jules cry because Rue is fucking shit up? The answer is no, I cannot, but I have begun season 2 anyway because I can no longer be left out of the conversation. This is like, I feel like right now that you guys are like reading, if I kept a diary, you'd be reading my diary entry on Euphoria, where I'm just like, oh my God, somebody please hold Cassie and tell her it's going to be okay and stop her from dating. Somebody please tell Maddie she can't get back together with Nate Jacobs. Like, I want to be the guidance counselor at Euphoria High who, fuck it, I don't know, put all these kids in like little jail cells to stop them from hurting themselves. Like, somebody go and like take Gia out for ice cream and tell her that her older sister's problems are not her fault. I'm just upset all the time. Can't Cassie and Lexi bond and be sisters and support each other? Of course, I have all of my hopes and dreams for the characters finding any kind of emotional solace and not just be constantly mercilessly beat down by the terrifying world that is the show. But like, a specific thing that we don't get a ton of in this teen show, it feels like it's just teens hanging out, being teens. And there is a great scene in episode 3 where you get kind of all the core girls in the girls' bathroom together. And Cassie, Sydney Sweeney's character, she is truly dressed like she's trying out for the school play, Oklahoma. And so when everybody's like, why are you dressed like you're trying out from Oklahoma? She has like a full-scale internal meltdown. And it's just this excellent round of banter between all of these, you know, essentially fake high schoolers having a moment that is just so high school, where, you know, the fun of high school shows, dramas, comedies, and whatnot is that the biggest things can feel like the end of the world. It can feel like the apocalypse if you wore the same outfit to school as somebody that you didn't mean to, and maybe you just had a bad day and the school didn't have your snack left in the vending machine, so you break down in a sob in the hallway. Yes, horrible horrible things are gonna keep happening in Euphoria. Like, people are gonna get assaulted by drug dealers. Dads are gonna have confrontations with their sons about them having sex with the same high school girl. There's gonna be inappropriate power dynamics in romantic relationships constantly. Like, we are going to be drug over the coals by this show in extravagantly upsetting situations constantly. But I wish it would do just a little bit more of the little tiny things becoming gigantic deals to a bunch of teenagers, because that too happens among high schoolers. I'm not counting out the ubiquity of catastrophic depression and like world-ending parties among teens. Valid. But my one wish for Euphoria is that we get to have more of these ensemble scenes where these incredible actors like Barbie Ferreira, Alexa Demi, Zendaya, Hunter Schafer, Sydney Sweeney, Maude Apatow, that we get to see them all just playing off each other and showing us the pre-established relationships that kids have when they've been going to school together forever since grade school and have really long-standing relationships. That is my one request for Euphoria, because I know it's never going to stop hurting my feelings. I know it's never going to stop torturing me. I know I'm never going to stop worrying. So I wish we would just get a little bit more teens being ridiculous teens in the most banal ways. So that's my one quick thing before I go. And that is our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/FeelingSeenPod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I am JorCrew on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. Our show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart, and our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher. This has been a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.